The title of the Human Rights Watch report is A Threshold Crossed. The paradox there is the threshold was not crossed by Israel. Like you say, this is all old news. The threshold was crossed by Human Rights Watch.
Mm.
They crossed the threshold. They now were looking square in the face without any extenuations, any qualifications,
Right.
any caveats. They said Israel is based on Jewish domination. It's, I mean, I could barely say that. I had a kind of a small public career denouncing Human Rights Watch.
Right.
I mean, many chapters of many of my books are devoted to denouncing its whitewashing of Israel. And I said to a friend of mine, Mouin Rabbani, I said, who would have thought the day would come to pass that Human Rights Watch would make us, meaning Mouin and I, look like milk toast?
Yeah.
They've now taken positions which, frankly, I've not taken publicly. I was of the school, let's just resolve this, let's end the occupation and move on.
Yeah.
But now the terms are changing.
So how have they? So it used to be let's end the occupation and move on, and we'll have a two-state solution. And now it's basically let's end the occupation, can't move on yet. We're gonna have to do more than end the occupation and have a one-state solution.
I don't know the answer to that. I think we're still in flux. But what I do think is quite clear is critical aspects of what's come to be known as the Jewish state, namely its right to maintain, preserve a Jewish majority, and its right to hold territory only for the use of Jews. And also, I should have added, Human Rights Watch denies the legitimacy of the law of return, that every Jew has the right to come to settle in Israel and get automatic citizenship. But, as Human Rights Watch says, a Palestinian who was born there, lived there, and traced his or her roots there cannot do that and is languishing in a refugee camp. They say that law of return is inherently discriminatory and reflective of Jewish domination. So they cast doubt on the legitimacy of that, or they clearly say it's illegitimate. Now, what that will mean ultimately in terms of a political settlement, I can't predict that. But what you just said, I think, is precisely right. Now we end the occupation, but there are still other things that have to be cleared up here.
Right.
There's still some problems here. There's still some problems here. And the problems are right in your state. They're not next door.
Right.
Your house. It's not your yard. It's not your backyard. It's not your front yard. It's not your neighbor's yard. It's your own house. There's a problem there because your state is based on Jewish domination. That's a problem. Your state is based on Jewish supremacy. That's a problem. So it's new. It's new. But it's new in two senses, or in two respects. It's new because these human rights organizations never said it before, but it's also new because I do not believe HRW, Human Rights Watch, would have gone so far out on the limb unless they felt confident that they could keep their donor base and their constituency, which means progressive and center Jews. Jews not only on the so-called progressive end, but also in the center. That's Human Rights Watch. It's not a radical organization. They felt they can keep their constituency. And that means for a large, not the whole, and maybe not yet a majority, but for a large portion of American Jewry, they've given up on Israel. They've
Okay.
given up on it.
So it's not like a strategic thing. We'll do this so that Israel then can do A, B, C, D. I mean, yeah, because I don't see what they get out of it unless it's like, okay, we're gonna call them out, and then then Palestinians are gonna do something, and we're gonna be like, oh, we called Israel out, we're fair, and now
No,
to
no, I don't think it was a kind of
conspiracy.
conspiracy. No,
Yeah.
no, no. It was too serious. If you look at the report, I've devoted most of my life, literally, to documenting what goes on there. And a lot of their documentation I had never read. It was really exhaustive. You don't do something like that as a, so to speak, true trick, ruse, a diversion. No.
But sometimes it's not even conscious, not to sound like Jungian and Freudian, but there is some kind of self-preservation that can show up, right?
Yes, but I personally think it goes deeper. As you're aware, I wrote a book probably about 10 years ago now. It was called Knowing Too Much: Why the American Jewish Romance with Israel is Coming to an End. And the thesis of the book was, for the longest time, Israeli propaganda and Israeli propagandists dominated our understanding of what's going on there. But gradually, slowly, incrementally, the truth began to creep in, to seep in. And American Jews, they're very well educated, the highest percentage of any ethnic or religious group who went to college, have postgraduate degrees, so on and so forth. They go to schools, they hear this stuff in class, they hear it from their professors, they read, as you mentioned, they read Benny Morris, they read Avi Shleim. And gradually, American Jews came to know too much. They couldn't deny anymore what was going on there. And so there was an estrangement effect. And now in recent years, there were three major developments. Development number one is the Israeli political spectrum. It went off the rails. Every other country in the world which has an alt-right, let's say in Brazil, there's a Bolsonaro.
Right.
But there's also a Workers' Party. There's
Right.
but there is a robust left. In the case of the United States, we had an alt-right government, Donald Trump. It was an alt-right government. However, we also had a Bernie Sanders. And my view, I'm not going to exhaust your time with it now. It's my opinion. It's an opinion. My opinion is, if there had, up until South Carolina, it looked like Bernie was going to win the Democratic nomination up until South Carolina. Had he won and had he faced off Trump, I think he would have won.
Me too.
I can't prove it, but I think we can both agree it's a reasonable possibility. Yeah. The thing about Israel is there's no center and there's no left. There's just a right, a far right, and an ultra right. That's it. There's no center. There's no left in Israel. And American Jews during the Trump years, every American liberal Jew, centrist Jew, you're supposed to hate Trump. Whether that was right or wrong, that was the politically correct thing to do. to be part of the resistance.
Right.
You knew that because you read the New York Times, you watch MSNBC. That's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to hate Trump. Well, now American Jews had a problem. The person they're supposed to hate, his strongest ally in the world is the Prime Minister of Israel. It's a problem for American Jews. Trump's number one ally was Benjamin Netanyahu. There was a bromance between the two of them. If you looked at opinion polls from around the world, except for one country in Africa, it may have been Liberia, but I can't tell you for sure. The only country in the world where a majority of the population, the only one where a majority of the population loved Trump was Israel. And so now you have a problem for American Jews. Israelis love Trump. The Prime Minister of Israel loves Trump. Trump loves them. So for American Jews, it's very hard to reconcile. It's very hard to reconcile.
But aren't there a lot of liberal Jews who fall into that category, who like the narrative, or will say themselves, look, we should criticize Netanyahu. He's too much. He's a bad guy. But Israel, but that's different from like BDS, or that's different from questioning Israel. Israel has the right to defend itself. Like they either feign or have convinced themselves that, Netanyahu's maybe a bit too much.
Yeah, but the problem is Netanyahu is now on the left end of the spectrum.
Oh, yeah.
The spectrum, as I said, goes from right to far right to ultra right. That's the spectrum. So you can't say Benjamin Netanyahu's too much. He's eminently representative of what Israel is and what Israel has become.